Greetings, fanboy huzz. Cancelled video games are fucking everywhere. There's cancelled video games such as Sonic Extreme with an E, a Rocket Power game that was built off of Sonic Extreme with an E, and many, many more. And then you get the video game ports, which are their own bag of worms, like fucking GTA on the Nintendo 64 or GTA on the Nintendo Wii U. However, the topic of today's video is everyone's favorite little yellow bastard, SpongeBob. You know how I said in the beginning of this video that there's a lot of cancelled games? That's kind of a fucking lie with SpongeBob. Don't get it twisted, there are definitely cancelled SpongeBob games out there, but for the most part, there aren't too terribly many. Matter of fact, in today's video, there are probably going to be more cancelled Nickelodeon games or very interesting changes in SpongeBob games than standalone SpongeBob games that were cancelled. So, without any more waiting, let's talk about some cancelled SpongeBob games. Okay, to set the scene a little bit, Heavy Iron Studios is a video game studio that is known for a good few games, but mostly their SpongeBob SquarePants games. The video games they made for the SpongeBob series include Battle for Bikini Bottom, the movie game, and Truth or Square. However, the weird thing is that if you look in between the release dates of the movie game and Truth or Square, there was like a noticeable 5-year gap between the two of them. Because of a time gap and a few other things, SpongeBob SquarePants Truth or Square feels very different from the other two games. However, something kinda funny is that 15 years ago, this video was uploaded. The video SpongeBob Early Video Game Demo shows a very different and early look at SpongeBob Truth or Square when it was still called SpongeBob Happiness Squared. Something that is in the video itself that I really like is that the music they overlaid it with is Don't Worry Be Happy and Ocean Man by one of my favorite bands of all time, Ween. The game itself actually has a few good differences, one of the biggest being the particle system. While a few effects do have SpongeBob SquarePants styled bubbles, a lot of it are these more generic looking stars. Another weird thing is that in the beginning of the trailer, it highlights 4 characters, 3 of which are playable, SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, but also Mr. Krabs, who isn't playable in the final game. The Kelp Forest level also looked pretty different because it looked like you actually would have had to do more platforming on leaves rather than just walking around. There are also some placeholder assets, a really good example being how in the final game you fight robots, however here you fight fish, and I think that was not supposed to be in the final game. Weirdly enough, there are also these 2 segments that are not in-game, but rather 3D white print animations that show what would happen if you collect certain items or do certain things in the game. One of which shows SpongeBob absorbing water and get bigger, and the other shows SpongeBob turning into a hammer so Patrick could use him to attack the enemies, which both of those things were in the final game. This video is bookended by an image that says coming fall 2009 to Wii and DS, PS2, and PSP. I think the reason why the first platform listed is the Wii is because this looks like a Wii build of the game. However, the thing that really interests me is that at one point in time, there was a PS2 version of this game in development. I really want to play that. However, this is not the only video we have of the game, because the user Sponges5 found a 2009 Heavy Iron Studio reel that included later footage of this game. I like the fact how the last video had Don't Worry Be Happy and Ocean Man, and this one has a fucking U2 song this time. That's pretty cool. There's also a working cover for this game that I think looks way better than the final cover, and also has a way cooler logo for the game. Matter of fact, both the logo and the title for this game are way cooler than SpongeBob Truth or Square's final version. However, the reason why the game was changed from Happiness Square to Truth or Square was because at the same time they were making this game, Nickelodeon was making the Truth or Square SpongeBob special, so they figured just change the game to that. I suppose when you look at it like that, SpongeBob Happiness Squared really wasn't cancelled, it just got changed into a mediocre product, which is arguably worse than being cancelled. However, the next game did have a short online test, but was actually cancelled. Let me just preface this by saying, I do not play MMOs, they're pretty, fucking gay in my opinion. No hate to gay people, I mean, I'm a fucking gay people, but still, fuck MMOs. I guess the main reason why I hate MMOs is because the first thing I associate their art style with being is fucking World of Warcraft, and that should not be the first thing anyone should associate with anything. I do not mean any harm when I say this, but World of Warcraft's art style looks like it would just call me a slur. And knowing it's fucking player-based, that probably would happen. However, two MMOs that actually did have a pretty cool style but are now totally unplayable are the Family Guy one and topic of this subject, the SpongeBob one. SpongeBob Town was a MMO being developed by Blue Arc Studios and had a technical demo open from October 25th to October 27th, 2012. The game was supposed to be released in 2013, but it was quietly cancelled before anything came of it. Thankfully, Encyclopedia SpongeBobia has provided a plot summary of this game, which I will now read. The mayor's dark scheme has jeopardized the city of Plankton into a huge explosion. Mr. Krabs, seeing the big cash opportunity, gathers up the people for a reconstruction business. SpongeBob Online brings the world of SpongeBob to an MMO game experience. It is a social platform where many players can interact with each other while enjoying diverse games together. Looking at the trailer from the game, which is still up on YouTube, this actually looks pretty fucking fire, I'm not gonna lie. In Bikini Bottom, it looks like you could build houses, go on this merry-go-round thing, or play basketball. Y'all think SpongeBob can LeBron on the dunk? You can also play as two characters, SpongeBob or Patrick, and you can change your costumes and actually seem to customize them. You can also play this little go-karting section, which looks really good for a SpongeBob MMO game in 2012. Overall, this game actually looks like it would have been a lot of fun, but unfortunately, it didn't come out other than those two testing days. The developers Blue Arc did go on to make an actual SpongeBob game I think you can still get called SpongeBob Game Station, but I don't recommend you get it because it just looks like another shitty mobile game. Truthfully speaking, I do wish that SpongeBob Town would have actually came out because it looks like it would have been a really fun SpongeBob game. However, you know how I said you could race in this game? Well, the next 3 SpongeBob games that were cancelled all had the ability for you to race in them, and they all seem to have been developed in different points of time. Okay, the first one of these games we are going to talk about are actually 2 different games. Maestro Interactive Games is a video game company that has made a few Hello Kitty racing games, a little surprise games for the Switch, and they're working on their own game called Moonchild right now. However, on May 22nd, 2018, they pitched Nickelodeon 2 different games with concept art, one being a SpongeBob platformer and one being a Nickelodeon racing game. The SpongeBob platformer concept art has SpongeBob and Patrick chasing a Krabby Patty into what appears to be a temple. I will say this art is pretty well drawn. It looks a lot like that 2010's oil SpongeBob art style, which isn't the best, but it does actually recreate that pretty well, which is cool to see. And the other piece of concept art is, weirdly enough, SpongeBob and Lincoln Loud racing in go-karts through Bikini Bottom. I really like how open Bikini Bottom looks in these 2 pieces of art, but I really don't like how they drew the go-karts in Lincoln. They look kind of like plastic. And overall, while this pitch did not go anywhere, it is possible that it was reworked into Nickelodeon kart races. You see, this was pretty recent and it happened back in like May 2018. However, the next one we're going to talk about was not very recent. Data Design Interactive is a video game company that is very infamous for how much they fucking suck. They are incredibly well known for their Wii and PS2 shovelware that absolutely sucked ass. They were a very lazy company. They were so lazy, in fact, that they reworked their video game Ninja Bread Man 3 different times into different games. All of them fucking sucked, by the way. They all had like really shitty motion controls and really bad level design and everything. They also made a Nickelodeon party game known as Nickelodeon Party Blast. It fucking sucks. 5 minigames, really shitty graphics, and a pretty unremarkable soundtrack. That's what you get with Nickelodeon Party Blast. However, years back, they actually had to sell off a bunch of their hard drives, and while a bunch of them were a bit broken up, a lot of them got fixed and it revealed a lot of the things they were working on. One of them was a kart racer that was later reworked into Mythmaker's Super Kart GP. The reason why I'm just calling it a kart racer right now is because I already know it went through like 3 different changes in development. However, knowing Data Design Interactive, there were probably more changes. The game was finally released as Mythmaker's Super Kart GP, which looked like this. However, something else that was found in those hard drives were these assets that were to be for a Nickelodeon kart racer game. Models for SpongeBob, Tommy Pickle, 2 Otto Rockets, Eliza Thornberry, and Jimmy Neutron, all in respective go-karts, were found on the hard drives. There was also concept art for a cat dog themed level found on the hard drives. All of these were pitched to Nickelodeon in May of 2003, but they were rejected. My question is there a build of this game that exists? I feel like there might be a build found on one of those hard drives because Data Design Interactive put shit together incredibly quick, so it would not surprise me at all saw that they already had the models in the engine, so you combined them and pitched that to Nickelodeon. So this was the earliest known Nickelodeon kart racer pitch that was cancelled. Now here's the one in the middle, the third. Developers Santa Cruz Games were working on a Nickelodeon-themed kart racer with SpongeBob as the lead character. This was SpongeBob SquarePants and Nicktoons Gravjet Racing. Believe it or not, this one is actually the one we know the most about because there was actually prototype builds for us to play. This one also by far got the farthest in development because it's almost finished. Like if your computer can run Xenia, which is an Xbox 360 emulator, you can play this game in its full entirety because it was finished. The game was scrapped due to financial issues, but it was found on an Xbox 360 dev kit and just released to the public. Actually, if you can play this one, I really recommend it. It is a lot of fun. There were 3 canceled Nickelodeon kart races. That's a lot of them. These next two I'm going to go over really quickly because there's not much available in either of them. Nicktoons, Nick All-Stars was a Game Boy Advance game that was supposed to come out sometime in Q3 or Q4 of 2004 for Game Boy Advance. The only way we know this game exists is because the private Nick store Communications, now renamed to Nick Central, mentioned it. No joke, what I have just said is everything we know about this game. The other one is Nick Extreme Sports, a game that was supposed to come out for the Mattel Hyperscan, a system that used cards to play as games. What a fucking stupid idea. It was supposed to come out alongside an Avatar game in 2007, and some concept art from it has been released recently. All of the art was found on one of the developers' Flickr pages, and what was shown was a skateboard, a snowboard, and a few snowmobiles, one including Timmy Turner. There was also an unfinished Danny Phantom model, one both rendered and wireframe. Overall, all we know about these two games is that they didn't come out and not too much is known about both of them. However, the next game is the exact opposite, except for it still didn't come out. The same digital story Communications that mentioned Nicktoons Nick All-Stars also mentioned another Nickelodeon game known as Nicktoons Snapshot. This game was being developed by Zed Studios and Royhawk Games. In this game, you can play as Timmy Turner, SpongeBob SquarePants, Danny Phantom, or Reggie Rocket, and you can kind of just walk around a few levels. The plot of the game is that all of these characters have a bunch of crime happening in their local town, so they decide to form a team and try and figure out where the crime is coming from. And judging by the Legos every single character has to go into, it was probably Invader Zim. You see, that all sounds really cool, but the game's designer, Graham Goring, had very different things to say. He was interviewed years later and described the game as, quote, a poisoned chalice. He said it was the worst thing he ever worked on, and it was incredibly horrible and stressful. So the game went through development hell, and while it was fairly close to being finished, once Z2 went belly up, the game was just cancelled. While there is a bunch of 3D concept art out there for this game, I really want to see what the final build would have looked like. You see, Z2 went bankrupt in July 2004, and the final build we have of this game, and the only build for that matter, was compiled in March of 2004. The thing is that this game was being worked on up until Z2 went bankrupt, so that means there are definitely later builds of this game out there. While I heavily doubt that this game's final builds were anywhere near as complete as SpongeBob Town or Nicktoons Gravjet Racing, I still feel like these builds would have been pretty complete. Well, maybe not like totally complete, but given how this game was supposed to come out between Q3 and Q4 of 2004, and that was around the time, and how far they got, I'd probably say like 80% playable at least. But until those builds somehow get released, we will never know. Thank you so fucking much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. I'm sorry I really haven't been too active on YouTube recently. I've tried to make a lot of videos, but all of them either get fully written and just not voiced, or fail in the writing stages. The Battle for Bikini Bottom video might not be coming out anymore. I really don't know. On one hand, it is fully voiced, and the skit I made for it is actually fully done, but on the other hand, I just don't really know if I'm going to release it or not. If I do not make the full video, I will definitely release the skit on Gersak Creations. Speaking of Gersak, please go to gersak.neocities.org, which is my website. You can see a lot of cool things there, like my music and information on the cancelled third Fairly OddPants game. Until next time, this has been Gersak. I don't know what my next video might be. Hell, it might be a fucking Radiohead video, but until then, see ya.